oftentimes we will become our own worst enemies, because in those moments we will just ruminate on all of the past and create more pain, more suffering, more anxiety, more stress.
Yeah.
And then you try and walk into your day? So wouldn't you rather start forming your thoughts, beliefs, and actions intentionally rather than unintentionally?
Welcome to the Evolve Leadership Show. My name is Timm McLagan. I'm the senior coach here at Evolve, and I'm joined by our founder, Angus Nelson. And Angus, your dome is a little more red than mine. Explain yourself.
I just came back from vacation. Nice. I was down in Sesimbra, just south of Lisbon, Portugal, about 40 minutes. And it's this gorgeous place right on the water, peaceful, chill, an old fishing village, and turned into a destination for summer fun.
Yeah, you look well rested. It is sunny here in Lisbon, Portugal, and wherever you are listening to us, we're excited to jump into this conversation because, Angus, we're going to talk about a technique, a secret code, what do they call it? Cheat code, as an entrepreneur that top athletes use, some of the highest performing entrepreneurs that I know use as well. And it's something that if we can harness it, it can really move the needle if we're open to experience it. Now, I want to set it up first. You told me a story that was kind of negative that I think many of us entrepreneurs can connect with. Monday morning comes around. You've had a great weekend. You were able to get some time off. And then what has been happening Monday mornings for you and me? But I want to hear your perspective over the last few months.
It's interesting. I think many of us struggle sometimes with our past, and all of our suffering, all of our anxiety is based on the past. And we oftentimes will indoctrinate ourselves. We will convince ourselves of lesser things because we spend time ruminating on our past. And for me, those Monday mornings, for whatever reason, sometimes those things would come up as I'm getting ready for my day. And I would start thinking about something and it would just pop in my mind. I would like wake up, or maybe in the dream it started and then, a thought came up. And I shared this story with you is I remembered a season years ago where I was with my kids and we were standing in line for ice cream. And straight in front of us were these two ladies and then one of the ladies' husbands and their kids are like these teenage kids, and they were crazy obnoxious. And like out of the blue, they would just scream like, ah, and scare the bejesus out of us and everyone in the restaurant. And they just thought it was hilarious. They would just like go up to one another right behind their head and then scream. And they thought it was great. And
parents weren't doing anything.
Parents weren't doing anything. Everybody's just, like this is normal. And we're all supposed to like,
live in their normal,
believe that this is their normal. And I'm like offended on so many levels. On one, my ADD is operating because those kinds of things will like set me off. Any kind of loud, obnoxious noise like sets me off. So I'm triggered, in that respect. And then number two is it's just rude. Y'all, there's this whole restaurant of people and you're letting out these blood curdling screams and the parents aren't doing anything to like, hey, y'all, like, Let's be, respectful of our environment, And I was just welling up with just offense. And finally, it just kind of came down. And I'm like, y'all, could you guys please keep it down? Like, there's other people in the restaurant. And one of the mothers turned towards me and started lashing out at me, like, who are you to tell us, how it's me. And to which only made me even more like furious. And I'm hearing from my kids, I'm trying to, whatever. And then one of the kids said something like, I don't know, he just kind of smart off. And I looked at the parents and the parents didn't say anything. Like, this is normal for your whole family is just being disrespectful. And not just to me, to the whole place. Right. And then there's kind of let that awkwardness settle. And then one of the kids did it again. And I snapped. I'm like, that's a good way to get shot.
Yeah, which is a really politically sensitive thing to say, I think, in the middle of...
And this is me. I'm totally embarrassed now looking back at it, which is part of the story that I'm about to tell is, why did I say that? Why did I shoot to violence? Why did I shoot to violence? See what I did there? Why did I say you'd be shot? And then, of course, they turned And then they're like, oh, you think someone's going to get shot because, and they started mocking me in front of all these people. And now like my shame, my embarrassment, my frustration is like, I'm doing everything I can not to like let it be on my face, but I want to lash out. I could punch that woman in the throat and walk away. I'm like, I probably feel really bad about being violent right now, but I didn't know what else to do.
Yeah.
So I kept it cool and whatever. And here we are years later.
How many years ago was this?
This is 4 or 5 years ago. We're still back in Nashville.
Got it.
And I remember conversation with the kids, you know, the kids like, what is that all about? Those kids, this is me. Yeah. And then even my son's like, Dad, you didn't have to say you're going to get shot. I'm like, yeah, I know. I don't know why I said that. But I was like thinking like PTSD, someone like would hear something like that because those screams like could take something out. I have found myself at certain seasons where that scene will play in my head. And then I will start thinking through how would I approach it differently, and what was it, and then what if they'd done, and what if they'd done, and then I would have, and I would play this whole thing. But every time it would carry with it shame or regret.
Wow.
And I would beat myself up. And we're talking like, I'm going to think about this stuff for the next like 2 hours. Even though I'm doing other things, like my brain would just keep rehearse. Having
the conversation, the private conversation in our own minds. Yeah.
And this is something I've found myself in, you know, kind of the work that I've been doing is I will find situations similar to this where I will chew myself up and treat myself so poorly because of the results that I will come up to in my imagination.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes we will become our own worst enemies because in those moments we will just ruminate on all of the past and create more pain, more suffering, more anxiety, more stress.
Yeah.
And then you try and walk into your day?
Yeah, it can't not affect it, right? I've worked with some professional athletes, and it's interesting when you ask them, very successful people, right, to get to where they're at, making big time money in football in this case, but in others. And you can ask them about their achievements and their great times. And but what they remember is the time they missed it. They'll remember when, I was talking to a safety and he's like, I only remember the times where they got by me and scored on me. Like those are the ones that stand out the most, not his interception in the Super Bowl. Yeah. No, forget that. It was the one that went over his head. And sometimes, especially as high performers, we can just sit there and ruminate on our mistakes or the would have, should have, could have, or what if I would have said, right? Yeah. All of these conversations or that sale that I let go. Why didn't I? And it ends up being a mental, just hitting yourself over the head over and over and over. And what it is many ways it's visualization. Yeah. It's visualizing a scenario, in this case, in the past, and we are ruminating it and beating ourselves up. I was talking to one of our members of our coaching, and he was getting hard on himself. He had made some mistakes in finances and relationships, and he just was over and over. And I said, "You're an amazing visualizer." He's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "You visualize your mistakes over and over and over again." One of our friends said, anxiety is an addiction to the past. And when we feel anxious, it's usually because there is something in our past that we have had a negative response to, and we are experiencing it over and over again. How does that show up in your life as an entrepreneur, and how does that affect you?
Well, here's the interesting thing is I've only observed that this was a thing just recently.
Yeah.
I've observed that it was operating in my life like over and over and over again for many, many years. And in the Enneagram world, if you're familiar with some of these personality profiles, one of the things that motivates an Enneagram 3-wing 2 is shame. And so there's periods of this that like, oh my gosh, the reason why I've experienced so much shame in my life is because I've allowed this to exist. Wow. And I have learned now how to treat it. Or at least one of the techniques that I use to treat it. And there's two ways I'll give you. One is visualizing who I am to be now in light of what I'm creating in the future, right? First, you must see it internally, and then you can be it externally. Yeah. So that's one of my weapons, and we'll talk more about that today because that's where we're going with all this. But this other piece is I forgave that woman.
Just today. Yeah, or just recently?
I mean, literally this morning.
Yeah.
That came up this morning. I shared the story, and that's how we got on this is I forgave that woman in that moment. But you know what I did in addition? Like I forgave those kids. I forgave the situation. But the most important part was I forgave myself.
Wow.
Like I literally said, Angus, I forgive you for two things. One is ruminating over that over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And then forgiving myself for not operating in the way that I thought I should.
Yeah.
And it happened. And now this is the lesson I'm going to learn. And now I can grow.
So good. Because a lot of times when we ruminate, it's almost like we think it's cathartic or we think it's like going to change something. But what we're really doing is beating ourselves up. Yeah. And there's something kind of permanent about, not permanent, but closing the loop, right? Mm-hmm. When I forgive that woman and I can move on from what I have. For me, it's not necessarily reliving, it's reliving similar things. I used to work in nonprofit, had a big family of little kids growing. And so finances were tight and we would scrimp. And for me, it was always seeing the checking account. Didn't matter how much was in savings. Yeah. If the checking account got below $100, all of a sudden I would have massive internal stress because I'm reliving the times when I didn't have anything. So even now, like plenty of money in the bank, like plenty of money in investments. But if the checking account, I told my wife, I'm like, listen, I'm just going to keep it. It's got to be above 1,000. Otherwise that'll be our bottom, because it'll create this rumination. It'll create the remembering and thinking I don't have what it takes. I don't have enough to take care of my family. And it creates this addiction to the past. It connects us. Yeah. And today what we want to talk about is one thing I think you did brilliantly, which is let's sever that. Yeah. Let's sever that rumination, that visualization of the past, but then let's actually replace it with something. And I know that's something we do in our program, but there's something about seeing a desired outcome and seeing it in your head. And I know top athletes do this. Yeah. Like we have the Olympics coming up and, divers or figure skaters, they'll be doing these, if they show the waiting room, right? The green room, before they're going to go on, they're all doing these little, for those of you listening on audio, their eyes are closed. They're doing all the motions, memorizing their dives, seeing the perfect dive so that when they get up there, they've already seen it 1,000 times and they're just going to execute, right?
Yep. And this kind of rehearsal is a different kind of rehearsal, right? It's rehearsal towards a behavior and an action that is in the present moment. Yeah. We as human species are the only species with this amygdala brain or whatever, this frontal cortex that gives us the ability to create, to imagine, and then to manifest. Yeah. Like we can actually bring things into being. I can dream up this design of this glass. And if I was a glass worker, I would be able to create this such thing, right? Yeah. Because I've imagined this thing to be. In the same way in our own life, we can do this little, sculpturing in our mind of who I want to be, how I want to be, how I want to show up, how the next meeting is going to go, how this launch is going to happen. And then we can spend time ruminating on that to where now we rehearse success. We rehearse possibility. We rehearse all the positive pieces of our lives. And suddenly we make those things possible. We make those things attainable. And furthermore, even as we've done in our own program, we have what we call the 10-minute motivator. Yeah. Where on one level you can premeditate all these good and wonderful things in your life, your relationships, etc. You can do it on a daily basis where you spend 10 minutes seeing yourself with a new narrative, seeing yourself in light of some affirmations that are tied to emotion. So you feel and sense that power and that possibility. You get to experience that on a very emotional level because we are emotional creatures. Yeah. And that stuff will pre-program you to perform at a higher rate, perform at your best, perform in a different consciousness.
Yeah. Now, Angus, I got to interrupt you because I need to call out one of our listeners because you're going, okay, here comes the woo. Visualization. Listen, you've been visualizing your whole life. You've just been rehearsing that negative story over and over and over, and it hasn't served you in the long run. In the short run, maybe you just made a vow and said, I'm never going to experience this shame again. That's going to drive me, but it's never left you in a positive space. Yeah. So what if you took all of those negative visualizations? What if you shifted it to something of possibility, something of that you're dreaming about, something that you really want, something where you see yourself at a whole nother level. It changes something when it's interesting when somebody steps into a role and they either can feel like they belong or feel like they don't belong. So much of that is what they've rehearsed in their mind. If they've seen themselves in that spot, like, oh no, this is where I'm meant to be. Now is just my moment to step into that. But if you don't think you're worthy of that, if you haven't visualized, if you can't see it, all of a sudden our psychology works against us, right? Where we just start self-sabotaging because we're thinking, I'm not worthy of this. And our past starts pulling us backwards. Let me just pause for a second to say this. There is one trait that you will find in every successful leader, no matter their industry, no matter their role. And that trait is action. And we want to inspire ambitious leaders like you to bet on yourself and take action on those audacious goals that you see in your heart. That's why we created our 90-day accelerator. It's a results-driven, battle-tested framework designed specifically for high-performing leaders like you to get unstuck and propel you towards your goals. And in just 90 days, you won't even recognize the person you used to be. To be a part of this elite community, go to evolveleadership.org. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, I'm not capable. I'm not this. I'm not that. All this because we've rehearsed something, right? And furthermore, like, let's unpack this and get even more real. Like, there's not just your own conscious, thoughts of things. There's also subconscious thoughts and beliefs. There's stuff that's operating in your brain all the time and you don't even know it. Trauma from your past that keeps like tripping you up where
like my checking account, right?
Like a checking account. It's like trauma. Like I can remember things like, for me, rejection is a big thing in my life because there are certain seasons in my life where I've experienced deep rejection. And like, that's like a bruise to me. It's like you touch that rejection button and it's like, I can feel that in my entire body. I'm like, and I will flex with like, like whatever, rage or impulse or words or whatever. And then there's this other piece of visualization, and that is all the information we are putting into our heads, into our ears, into our eyes all day long.
Yeah.
And you're rehearsing stuff, whether it be, talk radio, whether it be the news, whether it be, different movies, different music, like all the stuff you're listening to and you're taking in, your brain, conscious or unconscious, is processing that stuff.
Inputs. Yeah.
You're putting inputs into your life. And is the input you're putting into your life in this moment, is that the input that you want to output?
Sure.
Is that the input you want to influence your thinking?
The rage on talk radio, is that what you want to exemplify in your speech?
And then you wonder why your life can be uncomfortable, or why you can feel so aggravated, or why you can be so defensive, or why you can explode at someone at just the drop of a hat. And you're like, why did I do that? How'd that happen? There is something inside you that's being molded and shaped, either consciously or subconsciously, intentionally or unintentionally. All of that is happening. So wouldn't you rather start forming your thoughts, beliefs, and actions intentionally rather than unintentionally? Yeah. Wouldn't you rather do it consciously rather than being controlled, manipulated, and shaped subconsciously?
Yeah.
We are the only species that can like influence ourselves in this capacity. where we can turn something off, turn something on, open this book, close this book, turn this movie on, turn this movie off. Like, what are the things that we want to input into our lives? This individual, you're toxic. I don't want to have a relationship with you anymore. I don't have to say it that way.
Sure.
But some people you probably should.
Yeah.
And then there's other people like, I'm going to make less time available to this individual. Even if they're someone that used to be close, but now you've grown to a different area of your life. You've grown in different areas and they're like, yeah, this person is no longer a fit. Yeah. This person is no longer deserves a seat at the table in these conversations.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of intention. This is the kind of visualization that we create by the surroundings of our inputs.
Yeah. I heard a TikTok that was talking about somebody like the minivan philosophy is that you have some people that are in the front seat and they're the most trusted people that you want to be like, right? Or that you admire or that you look up to, and you want them guiding the minivan. And then there's somebody right behind you. They're close. You can still hear their voice and their input in your life. And then there's just some people that are along for the ride in the back. And there's some people you kick out of the minivan altogether because, and you can think about this as people, but then also as inputs. Like the different inputs that in our lives, they're going to shape us one way or the other. Why not have it be intentional rather than reactive? Why not have it be consciously focused on it rather than having the subconscious running on automatic so that we can influence how we show up in the world?
Yeah. I want to just for a moment, if you're listening and you're driving, probably don't close your eyes. But if you're sitting in a seat or if you're somewhere, close your eyes. But in any case, visualize what I'm about to tell you. If I were to tell you in this moment that you are powerful, you're unique, you're gifted, and you were destined for this moment in time. If I were to tell you you have what it takes, you're going to be just fine. You are worthy and you deserve every opportunity and every possibility that comes across your path. And right now, doors are opening that you don't even know of. Doors for you to walk through that are going to bring you more finances, more relationships, more possibilities in your life. And in this moment, you can sense with a deep breath, peace, fulfillment, satisfaction. In this moment, I want you to just breathe in air. Feel the power. Feel the love. Feel the joy. And then exhale. And breathe out the stress, the anxiety. In this moment, see yourself as the person you've always wanted to be. Content, fulfilled, happy, free. What if you rehearse those words on a daily basis? What if you rehearse that imagination on a daily basis? What if those are the kinds of things we ruminated on all day long?
Yeah. How would you show up differently?
Right?
In the world? When somebody comes at you with that tone, how would your response be different from a place of power, confidence, humility, rather than reaction?
Yeah. There's power in our visualization, power in the words that we speak over ourselves, power in the things we allow as inputs into our mind and into our consciousness. So why not make it something intentional? Make it something that serves you, something that moves you in the direction you want to go. That'll change your life. And as such, will change the lives of those around you because of the way you'll show up for your partner, for your kids, for your team, for your business, for your customers. You'll show up with a new level of peace or audacity or confidence or whatever it is, because now you've programmed your mind to see yourself in that state. And from that state, you'll get different results in your life.
Yeah.
This is just a natural hand in glove. Like, this is a natural byproduct is when you put good in, good things can come out.
That's so good. And so when you catch yourself ruminating on mistakes of the past, when you have those imagined arguments and, ooh, you had a good zinger that was going to follow that, pause, close the loop. If you need to forgive, if you need to let go, if you need to walk away, even in your mind, I'm walking away from this situation. And then what would life look like if everything you've been pursuing happened? One of the things I love we do in our program is we do a slingshot year where we put a year from now and we write down the things we have accomplished. If you had a banner year, what would that look like? And the crazy thing, right, is you start writing these things, and as you're writing them, you're like, there's just no way. Like, this isn't going to happen. I did it along with all of our clients as well. And I wrote down some things, Angus, that were crazy. Yeah. One that I wrote down, and at the time, this was a year and a half ago, and I wrote down, I live in a 5-bedroom, air-conditioned, pet-friendly, nice apartment in Lisbon, Portugal. And of course, I was in the US at the time. Yeah. Didn't look like all the visa stuff was going to work out. I just wrote it down along with a list of other stuff that I just thought was crazy. And I ruminated on this over and over and over. And it's crazy how the brain works. It starts looking for those opportunities. So when one of the things I wrote down was to be able to hang out with my brothers, which we haven't got to spend a lot of time at all. Yeah. And all of a sudden I'm like, hey, we have to go to California to do this thing to get to Lisbon, Portugal. Are you guys going to be in town? And it was the only time that each of my brothers could do it. They're like, we're going to be there. So they all show up and I'm sitting here. I'm sitting there on the couch, all watching football with my brothers going, how is this possible? We haven't seen each other in years. And all of a sudden I got to check off another thing on that list. We got a visa. We got to go to Lisbon. We're in Lisbon. In that same 5-bedroom, pet friendly, got a little dog running around, that my kids wanted. And there's this, the power of the mind is unstoppable. And many times we sabotage ourselves. Yeah. And so I want to encourage you to do that, is to write down, what would that look like? What do you really want? Something that seems crazy. And not just, I think accomplishments are great. Yeah. I think what quality of life, how would it feel with your relationships, with your kids, with your coworkers? What after that revenue goal is hit, how would you celebrate and see yourself walking in those steps?
Our mind is this gift from God to create, to have dominion, to have power, to have authority, to have audacity, creativity. Like, we can sculpt these things into our lives if we will allow ourselves to. Yeah. And most of us spend way too much time using it on things that don't serve us, that actually hold us back. And Mr., Miss Entrepreneur, whoever you are, a lot of the challenges, a lot of things you're facing in your business and in your life are a product of what you're believing about you. And my hope is that us having this discussion about visualization is helping you understand that the more you perpetuate the beliefs that you're having, those things that you find yourself ruminating on, those things are holding you back. Those things are programming you into failure, programming you into sabotage, programming you into procrastination, indecisiveness, and all these other areas are all being challenged because of the things you're allowing yourself to think about. So what if you thought about different things? Got really intentional and start programming yourself for success. Like, that's the invitation. And that's what I hope you walk away from this show, believing for yourself that you are going to start being intentional about what you allow to be an input into your mind and into your world. As we wrap up another episode of Evolve Leadership, thank you so much for taking time to invest in you. If there's to be any sustainable growth in your company or even in your relationships, you must grow first. And it's what I love to do for leaders, to help them grow, to challenge their thinking, sharpen self-awareness, to instill an unshakable confidence, and ultimately, upgrade their sense of self. And we do this through our proprietary method called Agile EQ Plus, where we're leveraging agile leadership and emotional intelligence. We provide our signature training for individuals, and for businesses, we've designed a unique curriculum for company-wide learning and development. If you'd like to learn more about our training or to schedule a call, you can simply go to evolveleadership.org. And until next time, stay driven, keep climbing, and never stop evolving.